The Tudor era was a defining period in English history. Especially under Elizabeth I, culture flourished. During this time, great artists like William Shakespeare lived. The rich held grand feasts and lived in luxury, although hygiene was rather questionable. So overall, it was a pretty chill era in English history. And then there was Henry VIII, who was known for having 6 different wives. 2 of them he simply had executed, eating his way from a young, athletic man to a diabetes-ridden fatso, and, oh yeah, casually founding the Anglican Church.
Divorced, beheaded and died. Divorced, beheaded, survived.
Henry VIII was born on June 28, 1491, at the Palace of Greenwich. His parents were Henry VII and Elizabeth of York. He was a very lively child, interested in music, poetry and sports, and he learned not only English but also ancient Greek, Italian, Spanish, French and Latin. Henry was not initially decided to be king. His older brother, Arthur, was supposed to inherit the throne. After his early death, Henry was crowned king following his father's passing. In his early years as king, he was very popular, as he was young, athletic, charismatic, and promised a bright future. He fought many years against France and Scotland, and he wanted to make England a European great power. When Henry turned 18, he married for the first time the beautiful Catherine of Aragon. They had a happy marriage, but they could not have any male children, so Henry wanted to divorce her. The Pope, however, was not interested and refused to annul the marriage. Our king did the only logical thing. He just established a splitting from the Catholic Church so that he wouldn't be depending on the Pope anymore and could remarry.
You know, just the usual.
Now free, Henry remarried in 1533 to Anne Boleyn. She, of course, came from an English noble family. They had a daughter, Elizabeth I, but Henry wasn't happy, because once again, no boys. So he looked for a way to get rid of Anne and came up with the brilliant idea to execute her for adultery, witchcraft and treason. This marriage lasted a record-breaking 3 years. Think he will ever beat that?
To find out, he married his 3rd wife just a few months later, Jane Seymour. This time, Henry got lucky, and after a year, Jane gave birth to a son, Edward VI. Finally, Henry could live happily ever after with his wife. Oh, that wasn't the plan. Unfortunately, Jane died shortly after childbirth, and Henry was alone again. Oh well, no time to waste. Soon he married his 4th wife, Anne of Cleves, who was actually German. Will this be the marriage to finally break his 3-year-old record?
No.
Henry and Anne's marriage lasted January, February, March, April, May, June. 6 months. I don't know what's worse. This or the fact that 6 months was kinda his average. This time, though, Henry was feeling generous and didn't have his wife executed. Instead, he divorced her because he found her unattractive. Bro, why would you even marry her? They had no children together. Big surprise! 6 months later, Henry married again. For the 4th, 5th, 6th time? I lost track. Whatever. His next wife, Catherine Howard, was young, beautiful, and, fun fact, also the cousin of his 2nd wife. I hope history doesn't repeat itself. Their marriage lasted only 2 years. Or should I say even 2 years? Because after that, Catherine was executed for adultery. Wow, who could have seen that coming? But, to be fair, she did actually cheat on him this time. So, fair enough. Moving on. Henry's final wife was also named Catherine. Catherine Parr. They were married from 1543 to 1547. And you know what that means? He finally broke his record. Only took him 3 wives. Henry and Catherine actually got along well and lived happily ever after. For 4 years. In 1547, Henry VIII died at the age of 55 from diabetes and a severe leg wound that never healed. His wife outlived him and became the new Queen of England. We may never know what would have happened if Henry had lived longer, but it's him, so the question isn't if he would have executed her, but when.
Now, you surely ask yourself how this madness began. The answer to this are the extremely bloody and unnecessarily complex Wars of the Roses, about which you could definitely make a great video of, if you only wanted to read through the 2000 pages long Wikipedia article. And of course Edward IV. Before we can talk about Edward IV, we must mention Edward III. He was King of England from 1327 to 1377 for 15 years and had a lot of dissensions, who were divided into 3 houses: York, Lancaster and Tudor. These houses rivaled each other for the succession to the throne, leading to a huge conflict. Edward IV was born on April 28, 1442, as Edward, Earl of March. He was a Yorkist and the eldest son of Richard Plantagenet, known as Richard of York. At the time of Edward's birth, Henry VI from the House of Lancaster was King of England. He was considered a weak ruler and suffered from severe mental illness. As a result, Richard of York was appointed Lord Protector, but he himself aspired to the crown. Henry's wife, Queen Margaret of Anjou, prevented this, leading to a bitter power struggle. These conflicts became known as the War of the Roses, named after the symbol of the rival houses, the red house for the Lancaster and the white rose for York. After several battles, Richard of York lost the Battle of Ludford Bridge in 1459 and fled to Ireland. His son Edward, who was 17 years old at the time, fled to France. In 1416, Edward returned, won the Battle of Northampton, captured Henry VI, and imprisoned him in the Tower of London.
Hey, let me out. What are you doing? Oh, no.
Richard returned from Ireland, but was killed later that year in the Battle of Wakefield. From this time on, Edward became the new head of the House York. After a lot more battles, including this one, and this one, and, oh yeah, this one too, Edward won and was crowned king on October 28, 1461, at the age of 19. Henry VI fled to Scotland and majored to France.
However, Edward's reign was not stable. In 1469, he fell out with his brother George, Duke of Clarence, and his father-in-law Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick. They opposed Edward's secret marriage to Elizabeth Woodville, a widow of a former Lancastrian. A rebellion ensued, and Edward was captured, but later freed by his brother Richard of Gloucester. Neville then allied with Margaret of Anjou, restored Henry VI to the throne, and forced Edward into exile in the Netherlands. In 1471, Edward came back and won 2 more massive battles. And you know what else is massive? In the Battle of Barnet, Neville was killed, and in the Battle of Tewkesbury, Margaret's only son, Edward of Westminster, was slain. This marked the end of the Lancastrian line. Shortly afterwards, Henry VI also died, likely murdered. In the same year, Edward IV reclaimed the throne and stayed king until his death in 1483. With his wife Elizabeth Woodville, he had 7 children, 2 sons and 5 daughters. His 2 sons, Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury, became infamous as their uncle Richard of Gloucester murdered them by the ages of 10 and 12 to get in power himself. He had them imprisoned in the Tower of London, from which they never returned.
Hey, what are you doing here?
In 1674, 2 children's skeletons were found in a chest, which is definitely not creepy at all. Edward's brother, Richard of Gloucester, ascended the throne as Richard III in 1483. However, he could only hold it for 2 years. The murder of the 2 boys made him very unpopular. Wow, who could have ever possibly thought that? And many powerful supporters abandoned Richard III in favor for another rival with the claim to the throne, Henry Tudor. In the 19,678th battle, the Battle of Bosworth, Henry Tudor fought against Richard III, who was killed in the battle. Henry Tudor got crowned in 1485 and married Elizabeth, a daughter of Edward IV. This marriage united the House of Tudor and the House of York, bringing the Wars of the Roses to an end. They also had a son, who I feel like I've seen before. Probably just a déjà vu. The rose of the House Tudor is therefore a red rose with a white center. The Tudor rose is still a symbol of England and the English monarchy today. It appears, for example, in the coat of arms of the United Kingdom and in the coat of arms of Canada. Wait, Canada? What the